Hi, I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council, and at tonight's City Council meeting, most of the airtime was taken up by a discussion about HUD funding, the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. So that was broken up into two parts, both of which occurred in preliminary open meeting. For those of you who don't know, preliminary open meeting is generally where we have discussions, updates for council, and direction to staff to bring back things which we vote on. Sometimes we do actually give final direction in preliminary open meeting, but usually it's just discussion to come back for a future vote. So that was kind of what we did tonight in preliminary open regarding HUD funding. The first discussion was how we actually use the HUD funds that we receive. The city of Plano receives about $2 million a year in HUD funds, 2.1 in 2022 to be more precise. Though I'm not going to parse it down to the dollar. Now, I'm just going to tell you how the issue breaks down and what the focus of the discussion was. Of $1.6 million in HUD funds, 688,000 went to the city of Plano. So yes, that is a giant proportion. So we discussed how we're using the HUD funds that we receive, how much of that goes toward administration and management, and particularly how we could and should be using that in collaboration with our community partners, our nonprofit partners, faith groups, etc. Now, because we are HUD recipients, part of the home funds that we receive, there are several different types of grants that HUD provides. We receive CDBG, Community Development Block Grants, and home funds. So you can do certain things with each type of grant, but for the home funds, 15% of what we receive is required to be set aside for what's called CHODO, which is basically a community partner that specializes in this type of housing. And we have not had a local CHODO since 2014. We have partnered with a CHODO in Fort Worth who doesn't really do anything in Collin County and doesn't have any connections in Collin County, at least not the way that our Collin County nonprofits do. So that was a big focus of the discussion. How are we actually using this? How are we responsibly using the tax money? And it's your tax money sent to Washington to the federal government and given back to us with strings attached. That's the nature of the HUD funds we receive. So council then shifted to the discussion, which I wanted to put on the agenda for last week, which was actually withdrawing as a recipient of HUD funds. Plano no longer being a recipient of that federal money. So the main reasons I wanted to do this were, first, we're required to jump through HUD's hoops, check HUD's boxes, and apply their formulas for issues related to quote unquote affordable housing and homelessness, etc. in our community. Bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. don't understand the nature of the problems in our community. And there's no better illustration of that, in my estimation, than the fact that they principally push the idea that we have to build increasing multifamily to provide affordable housing. And they don't understand the Texas property tax system. As frequent viewers of this recap know, homeowners are afforded a number of protections under Texas property tax law against property tax increases. There's a 10% cap to the maximum taxable, the maximum increase to the taxable value of your home every year. There are the homestead exemptions. There are various other exemptions, over 65 exemption, disability exemption, and over 65 freeze, just locks your tax where it is once you turn 65 and apply. Renters get none of those. Renters get hit full in the face with every penny of the tax increase that comes with the commensurate property value increase. And this was illustrated to me painfully in 2019 after our first Property Tax 101 seminar that I deliver every year with Scott Grigg. That was our first one. Scott Grigg is a candidate for Collin County Tax Collector. Our seminar this year is going to be April 25th at Lord of Life Lutheran Church in Plano at, I believe, 6:30. So please join us for that. But a gentleman approached me after the seminar, that was back in 2019, said that he has a rental property that he rents to a widow. She's on a fixed income, and because property values had skyrocketed so much, property taxes had skyrocketed so much. She was old enough for the over 65 freeze, but because she rented, she didn't get that. And because he was a landlord, he didn't get that. Property taxes had gotten so out of control that she could no longer afford to pay the rent and the property taxes on that rental home. And so he was subsidizing her. He was paying out of his pocket, never mind not making any money on his rental. He's paying her to stay in his rental property because he didn't want to have to evict her. The bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. don't understand how that applies to all renters, whether they're renting an apartment or a single-family rental home. And many renters just think that their landlord just keeps jacking up the price of the rent, and they think they don't even pay property taxes. That's not true at all. So anyway, by following HUD's formulas, which we've been doing for 37 years in Plano, and applying their rules, I think they've put us into an artificial way of thinking about how to address these issues in our community. And not just an artificial way of thinking, but one that's not entirely applicable to North Texas or a community like Plano. And I think we could come up with the same amount of money, the net money that we get from HUD, and we could just come up with that money ourselves. That money represents 1/4% of the city of Plano's budget. That's 1/400th of our budget. I think we could come up with that money ourselves. We could put it to largely the same uses, but better by providing it through our own grants to our community partners the way we already do through our Buffington grant system, so that our community partners, our nonprofit and faith community, can put it to much more flexible and efficient use than we can. Nonprofits are very good at stretching the value of a dollar because they have to be. Governments, not so good. We try our best. That's why we're the city of excellence, but still nonprofits are able to do that in a way that governments just cannot. So what I would have liked to have seen, and that kind of foreshadows the conclusion, is that we withdraw from HUD, we fulfill these needs in our own community much more flexibly. That money is still in the HUD pool. It doesn't just vanish into the ether, and it would go to a city that is less capable of caring for its own community and addressing those issues in its own community. So as you saw with the foreshadowing, I lost that vote. Didn't get my way, but we are going to come back and explore the process by which we apply the HUD funds that we do get and make sure that we are using that money as efficiently and responsibly as possible. So then we moved on to the regular meeting. In point of fact, we stopped the preliminary open meeting, opened the regular meeting, then went back to the preliminary open meeting because by law we are required to start the meeting at 7 o'clock as we post in the agenda that is publicly published. So the first item on tonight's agenda was to approve an increase to the Collin Creek Culvert contract. The current contract was $22.8 million. We were to approve an increase of $4.7 million. We did. We approved the increase. So this is an enormously expensive project, and it's important to, and now it's like almost $28 million. And the culvert is basically the drainage system for Collin Creek, hence the name Collin Creek Mall, Collin Creek. And it's the drainage system that allows that water to keep flowing and run off. So to be perfectly clear, this was built back in 1979, 1980, before Collin Creek Mall stood on that ground. We were going to have to maintain that regardless, even if Collin Creek Mall was never developed, even if Collin Creek Mall burned down, fell over, then sank into the swamp. So we were still going to be on the hook for this. So it's not necessarily just giving the developer a freebie, because it's not. So just please be aware of that. Second, we approved a settlement with the Collin Creek developer, speaking of which, for cost sharing of certain resources. And third, we reviewed, so this is interesting. Third, we reviewed the certification of emerging and reliable transportation tech, CERT for short, for Swyft Cities. So last fall, we reviewed the concept of what's called JPODs. And I spoke about this on the recap. JPODs are kind of like Disney Skyliners. So if you've ever been to Walt Disney World Resort lately, I shouldn't say ever, if you've been there lately in Orlando, some of the resorts have basically a cable network going through Lake Buena Vista, connecting resorts to parks. So instead of taking the buses from the resort, you get on the Skyliner, and it's like a cable car. It's like an enclosed ski lift, and you just ride the line from your resort, maybe through another resort. Maybe you have to change cars and then go off elsewhere. Now, what was proposed with JPODs back last fall was the same kind of concept, networked through the Legacy Park area, Legacy West, shops at Legacy, the corporate park, all of that. So the idea is that you could just physically walk into one of these cable cars, JPOD, and be carried to where you want to go. So it looks like there were some snags in pursuing the information there. And the Regional Transportation Council reviewed, and the City of Plano reviewed, an alternative, which is kind of the same concept, called Swyft Cities. It's basically a pod that you could probably fit up to 8 people in, but we were assured that if you want to take it by yourself, you can take it by yourself. One of the legitimate questions that was raised is, okay, you're suspended 30 feet above the air, and maybe it's 4 or 5 minutes until you have the opportunity to get off, and being suspended 30 feet in the air, you can't just run away. What if you're trapped on there with a serial killer? So if you want to be alone in that car, then you can be. Not really a car, a pod, but you get the idea. So safety was definitely a consideration. So we said, okay, let's go ahead and pursue exploring this to basically come back with a plan for implementation. They appear not to want any money from the city, which I like. They would just need rights of way, is my understanding, but we gave direction to submit the application for exploration and coordination with the Regional Transportation Council. So look for some variant of that to come up in the future, and we're going to continue those discussions. Lastly, we had our 2022-23 status report and 3-year financial forecast. So I took a lot of notes here, so I'm just going to run down these in no particular order. We are experiencing, surprise, surprise, labor scarcity. In some areas more than others, but some of our departments have a 20% attrition rate, meaning turnover. So we need to replenish that, but we don't have sufficient labor demand to fill those positions. Inflation rate currently nationwide is 6%. That's still pretty large. It's not the 9% we had previously, but it's pretty big, and that comes with an impact. Our CIP resources are at full capacity, so we program a certain amount of funds every year into our Community Improvement Plan, or CIP. And right now, our resources are running at full capacity for what we have programmed into it, partially because of, largely because of inflation and labor scarcity. We are going to be adding an inflationary factor to our depreciation schedule to basically capture the effects of inflation in our depreciation. So for you finance wonks out there, that should be good news. Our general fund is expected to be at 30 days of working capital. So that's our target, is to be able to have enough on hand in the general fund to fund our city operations for 30 days. So of course, property taxes, which you get a great big bill at the beginning of the year, that's not our only source of revenue. We'll also get sales taxes, taxes and fees on services. The budget that we're looking at starting, this starts the budget process, includes a 3% salary increase and a 15% increase to health insurance because we basically self-fund. So the 3% salary increase, as I said last year in the last budget cycle, I wanted to pursue the no new revenue rate, just keeping property taxes flat, but I was not willing to sacrifice the 3.5% at the time salary across the board salary increase for our staff, because at 9% inflation, a 3.5% salary increase is actually a real pay cut, which it was, which it still would be with 6% inflation. Population projections going out to 2025-26, which is right around the corner, 3 years. Our population is anticipated to reach 301,200. That's according to trends calculated by the planning department. We are projected to issue $80.7 million in bonds this spring. These are bonds that were approved in the bond election of 2021, but we have not yet issued. So as you know, most of that, not all of it, but most of it went toward street maintenance. We are projected to have $500 million a year in new property value, not existing property value increases, but new property value. Think Collin Creek, Beacon Square, Haggard Farms, that kind of thing, every year for the next 3 years. So that'd be $500 million per year for a total of $1.5 billion at the end of 3 years, roughly. 52 positions were added this year to the city staff's budget for $5.3 million total for those 52 positions. We did, this will delight many folks, we removed the short-term rental hotel motel tax, the hot tax, from our future tax revenue forecast. We receive taxes currently, hotel taxes, from short-term rentals in Plano. Given the recent discussions on council, we have removed that equation from our future forecasting because I think we all see where this is heading. Recycling. We currently collect $0 in recycling revenue. That's because the recycling value proposition has gone upside down for a variety of factors. Now, one thing I want to end on. I noted at the end of the meeting that, kind of like I alluded to a little bit ago, we're projecting a 3% pay increase for our staff amid 6% inflation. So inflationary pressure continues to burden us all, and our staff took a real pay cut last year, even though it was a technical pay increase. And we're currently commissioning a compensation study, which is going to take a few months. It's not going to be ready to bake into this budget cycle, but I said in the meeting that I want to explore options to help offset the impact of inflation for our staff. The new compensation program won't be able to be baked into the budget at this point, but we are going to program some money into the budget so that we can adapt and adjust. But also, I think it's the right thing to do to help offset that inflationary pressure for our staff with some kind of mechanism, whether that's a salary increase, a one-time bonus, whatever it is. I think our staff deserve it, and I think it's necessary, and not just for the city. It's necessary for all companies trying to compete in the marketplace. And even though we don't sell things, we don't sell widgets, we are still in competition with other cities for businesses, for residents, etc. But the city's equivalent of raising the prices on our goods and services is raising taxes. And so we have to strike a responsible and appropriate balance between doing the right thing for our people on staff and doing the right thing for our people who are taxpayers. So I'm going to leave on that note. That should be just about 20 minutes of this recap. Please attend the Texas Forever Fest this Saturday at Haggard Park. This will be our second annual Texas Forever Fest to recognize our Texas pride and commemorate Texas Independence Day. A few weeks late, but still, hey, it's the thought that counts. I'm Shelby Williams with Plano City Council. Thank you, good night, and God bless.